Welcome to the Red Gauge Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Kyle. This is Josh. Today we're joined by Alec Jose. He's a strength coach, owner of RPE 11. He's going to the London Strongman Classic in July 5th. He's coached some national level weightlifting champions, national and world level strongman champions. So real excited to have you on the show. Thanks for taking some time to come here.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. And just a quick little error, because I don't want any coaches to get all feathered. I've coached national level athletes in weightlifting who've reached the top 10, not quite champions.
Oh, not quite champions.
National
Okay.
level, yeah. But national champions and world champions in strongman.
There were already people writing in.
Yeah. There were already people in the comments trying to fact check.
Yeah.
They're like, we all know Kyle can't read, but this is appalling.
I just don't need a coach to get mad at me for saying something I didn't do. But thank you for having me. Appreciate being on, guys.
Yeah. It's great to have you here. So we usually start out by asking how you got into sport.
Which sport? Just strength
Any
sports?
sport. Yeah. Where'd you start? I like to see how people got from pee-wee baseball to being like a world-class strength coach, because it's always a fun story, and there's usually some really interesting I really screwed this up. Great takeaways for people who are listening if they want to shortcut that path a little bit, So yeah, just where'd you get started?
Well, I'd say a first really good step of being a world-class coach is to be really shitty at the thing yourself.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right? So that helps considerably. Bill Belichick never caught a touchdown in the NFL during the Super Bowl, right? Not to say that I'm comparable, but point being, I started doing Olympic lifting probably right around the age of 17, 18, just personal trainer in New York City after essentially quitting working as a full-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor. And I really liked it. I fancied weightlifting quite a bit. The sport of weightlifting, snatch, clean, and jerk. And I was terrible at it. Really bad, god awful. I was one of those guys that could pause squat 500 pounds and deadlift 600 pounds, but couldn't snatch 264. Terrible. So my strength always exceeded the numbers that I was able to hit in the platform. And you rack your brain long enough trying to figure out different methodologies and techniques and whatever, you become utterly obsessed. At least I did, and you end up learning a thing or two. And in developing, I've described my accolades within strongman are quite good. I'm proud of them. And I think the only reason why I got that far is because I sucked in a different sport. But also I just happened to very randomly and quite luckily, quite literally get embedded with the absolute best minds in the industry of strength sports and exercise science. I don't care what anyone says. At 17 and 18. At my first job, I was an intern at 18 at Peak Performance, which is closed now, but Peak Performance was the best training facility in New York City, period. Hard stop. Greatest there ever was and ever will be. No gym is even close to the type of clientele that they had, ranging from Olympic champions in boxing to Hugh Grant. Who's the guy that played X-Man? What's his name?
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman. So, he had Olympians and Hugh Jackman, and everyone in between would train there. The CEO of Google trained there, and then we had U.S. Olympians at bobsled. So that facility is where I first got my start as an intern. I think I just turned 18 or so. And, in that facility, you had guys like Pat Davidson, who's one of the leading experts in exercise science to this day. He was the head of exercise science department at the school out east. What's that university? Goodness gracious. It's in Massachusetts. I'm forgetting, but it's one of the leading schools in exercise science. But Pat Davidson led that school. You had Ed Williams, who's one of the greatest education directors in exercise science. You had Dan Trink, who's opened many gyms in New York City. He's one of the best in exercise science. And all of those guys all of them were my mentor. And then on top of it, Charles Poliquin, who's the greatest strength coach to ever live. It was the only gym in all of New York City Poliquin would agree to go to. And he was
interesting
because Poliquin refused to go to New York City because he believed the pollutants in the air were actually too detrimental to his health. He went a little too far down the rabbit hole, but that gym was the only one that he would go to. So just kind of give you an idea of that facility, and that's where I started. Right. So I never started with bullshit bro splits or ridiculous progressions. I started with just the best, and that was totally accidental and pure luck. There's nothing I did to deserve that, but that's where I started. And from there, in my 20s, if I found a strength coach who I thought was brilliant, I would find where they lived, message them, and ask them if I could live near them and spend months with them learning what they knew. And I did that a couple of times in my 20s. just because I wanted to be a better coach. And
Right.
when you keep doing stuff like this and you suck at a sport and you keep on trying and trying and trying and you synthesize and you add 10 years, you're a pretty good coach.
Yeah. It's funny how many of like just like very, like high performers have a similar story where like we had Max 8 on and he talked about leaving Montana and going to California just to sleep on a guy's couch.
Yeah, he trained with one of my greatest fucking heroes, Glenn Penlay, and the Bulgarian system out there. Like, yeah, I know Max and I know his whole story, but it's very similar.
Yeah. Who's the Magnus Benedict? Has the great story about sleeping in a tent next to the gym he wanted to train at. He's like just found a field and slept in a tent so that he could train in this gym.
Yeah, Benny Magnuson. He moved to a field
Benedict Magnuson.
in
There we
England.
go. Thank you. Yeah.
He left Iceland, went to a field in England, lived in a field in a tent, and would wake up and train with the Highland game throwers. Go shower at the gym nearby because that was his only source of shower. Work out again, be a bouncer, and then come back home, shower, and train again. Yeah, he was a savage.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is like, if you want to be great at something, go find it. Go do it.
Yeah, find what you love and let it kill you. Right.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite sayings. I say it all the time.
Did you guys just become best friends?
We just became best friends. I got another one. I got one of your quotes up here. It says, "How you feel is a lie."
Oh yeah, that's a big one. That's originally from Dan Trink. He told that to me when he was coaching me when I was 18 or 19. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just stuck in my head.
It's an interesting thing. Might as well get into it. Why not? How you feel is a lie is a great saying, because so much of like being good at strength training is like learning what those feelings actually mean. Like so often when we feel like trash, we don't want to do something, and it's not always an indicator that we shouldn't be doing something, right?
No, and people kind of mistake that as a form of badassery, if you will, or some sort of machismo quote, and it's not. It's people misinterpret it as ignore the pain and bullshit like that, which is it's really not that at all. It's entirely of your results will not be dictated by how you feel, but the things in which we do. And in order to get to a high level in performance as a coach or as an athlete, you have to be more cognizant of what's actually happening around you and the speed in which you're moving, whether it be technical or strength related or whatever. And those are your markers of whether you push or not. And because your feelings will completely deter success. Your body, evolutionary speaking, is completely designed to keep you safe. Your parasympathetic state wants you to be safe and sound and eat food and sleep. Like, that's what, evolutionary speaking, our body's been designed to do. And you have to fight that, because there are times in which you can do something and it's time to do it. And just because you feel a certain way won't dictate those results, or shouldn't dictate those results. So that's really what that saying is for.
Yeah.
You see it all the time. I feel like how often, just like you're saying, like maybe even less like at the extreme level, but just like how many times have you ever been like, dude, I'm exhausted, I can't really do anything, and just like stepped outside and immediately, like once you've like took the first step outdoors and you're like okay, like this is great.
Yeah.
I'm outdoors, like I could do whatever. Like even if it's not go lift, like just go take a walk or play with your kids and stuff like that.
Totally.
Like,
yeah. Well, there's a million like interesting studies about how we feel versus how we perform. Like there's some studies on very like acute sleep deprivation where they just gave people like 4 or 5 hours of sleep and then had them lift weights, and they hated it and they felt terrible, but they performed just as well as they did in the control environment, right? And so obviously if you stack that up a bunch of times, you'll probably get to the point where you got problems, but like those acute responses aren't always reflections of where you're actually at.
No, I've had my absolute best days of training myself in some of the worst states I've ever been in.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where you just have to commit to what it is that you're doing. And, at a certain point, training for strength sports specifically, because that's, really what we're talking about today. Yes, it should be founded predominantly in science, and there should be a system to your training methodology. But at a certain point, you're almost like a bit of an artist, and you always hear about artists talk about some of their greatest breakthroughs are in their worst states, and or states of confusion or loss or whatever. And once you kind of break through those things, you start being able to piece together some really interesting results. At least I find.
Yeah. We had a guest on who we stole a quote from. It was once you've done wrestling, everything else is easier. But it kind of stands for like once you've done anything hard, everything else is easier, right?
Absolutely. Like, I also would agree with that statement. As someone who wrestled, I would agree.
Yeah. It ain't that far off. Yeah. So You got your start, lucky start, worked
Right.
hard. Yeah, yeah.
I'm so sorry. How I became a strength coach, right? So
Yeah.
so once I traveled around the country, learning from a bunch of series of coaches, I ended up being a personal trainer in New York City. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So just working there, and if we're talking about strongman, at the time I was a younger man. I want to say I was 24, 25 when I started coaching some athletes locally, and all Olympic lifting and some powerlifters. Because let's be honest, powerlifting coaching is easy as fuck.
It's the easiest
But
one. It's so nice.
it's the easiest one. So if you understand basic periodization, you'll be all right. But so I was coaching powerlifters and Olympic lifters because that's what I was more proficient at. And then there was a strong woman who asked me to help her with her program. Actually, it was someone that I was dating at the time, actually, and she had a coach, a strongman coach, who she kept on finding just disagreements with the programming, or she kept on getting injured, specifically in her QLs, and she asked me to take over a program just to help rehab her. I said sure. So I rehabbed her. I was like, all right, let's get you a strongman coach because I know you want to compete, and I'm not a strongman coach, nor am I a strongman athlete. And she then found a local show. She's like, oh, can you just program for the show? I was like, all right, I'm not particularly comfortable doing this, but sure. And then I programmed for the show, and then she won the show. I was like, okay, well, you qualified for nationals. You got to go find a strongman coach because I really don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I am not a strongman coach. And she's like, all right, well, and then I programmed her for nationals until she found one, and then she just didn't find one, and I knew what she was doing, but whatever. So I coached her for nationals, and then we won nationals. I was like, ah, shit. So well, now you're the amateur national champion. So then she got her pro card. And then there was America's Strongest Woman, which is the nationals for all the pros, so all the very best get to do that one. I was like, you really should find a strongman coach for this because I don't know. Again, I don't know what to do. And then we went to America's Strongest Woman, and then we won that. I was like, well, fuck. So then I became a strongman coach, and then because she won all those shows, and she was an okay local lifter, and went from an okay local lifter to being the best in her division in the country. People then inquired with me about strongman coaching, and I was like, I guess I do this now. And then
Yeah.
The principles
at that
of
point, it would have been
right?
3 or 4 years later, I coached 3 world champions.
Yeah,
that was cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it turns out that all those years of sucking as an athlete myself and being frankly completely irresponsible with my time and money and finding coaches around the country and living with them really paid off in what I find to be the ultimate strength sport, which is strongman, strongwoman, because nothing's more demanding, and I really love it. So it helped out.
When you're going, so like, let's say you're training an athlete, and it's like, I guess I don't know how often it's like, how many shows is common. I guess it depends on what level they are, right? But like right now you have Lucas Hatton, and I mean, I feel like you guys just got done with World's Strongest Man. I know he just did a smaller meet, and now you guys are going to England. So there's like 3 shows. Like, how do you manage?
The Ranger is a show that he runs. He doesn't compete in it.
He didn't compete. Okay,
he owns that show. He puts it on.
Okay,
he's the host.
So only 2 over 3 months, but still, like
it's a lot. So basically, it depends on your, like you said, it depends on your level. If you're a local amateur and you're just kind of coming up, if you're in moderately good shape, you could do a few shows back to back and just you would gain quite a bit from the exposure to the implements, which at a certain degree that is worth your time in maybe stunting or maintaining a basic progression of strength in order to attain a lot more exposure to skills like that. At that point, it's kind of worth it for that bell curve to go up in exposure. And then what I find is they get better, you start decreasing the amount of shows you should do, in my opinion.
Sure.
And then from there, your focus is getting just stronger. Like once you're skilled enough broadly, your job is to be incredibly strong in every metric, whether it be power, speed, forced production, whatever. Every single measurable metric, that's now your job to be good, conditioning or otherwise. So for Lucas, basically because of where he is in the sport, depending on who you talk to, he's either top 3 in the world or top 5. There are 4 majors, just like tennis, within the sport of strongman. And, those majors aren't evenly distributed, but they're relatively far apart from each other. They're anywhere from like 6 to 10 weeks away from each one, which is not a lot of time. So, Lucas will probably in the foreseeable future do 2 to 3 of those every year, probably 3. There's one of them that will more than likely turn down going forward, but that remains to be seen. But yeah, so you're right. There's not a lot of rest time. So yeah, he trained for World's Strongest Man, competed. We did a GPP block, And now we have 10 weeks of training, or at least when we started the program, we had 10 or 12 weeks of training, all for the strongest man on earth, which is about 5 weeks after the show we're doing next weekend in England. So the show next week in England is the Royal Albert Hall, the Strongman Classic. We're not training for any of those events. I'm not
You're
prioritizing
training through it.
Training right through it.
Okay.
Some of the events happen to overlap with the strongest man on earth, which for us is the true world title. That's the Super Bowl of the year, and that's convenient. But even if it wasn't, we wouldn't have trained for it. So
Yeah.
he's simply doing the show. Strategically speaking, it's not smart for us to do the show. But at a certain point, as a coach, even if someone is world class, top 3, or even the best, you have to still keep in elements of fun for the athlete. Simply put,
Sure.
like you can't it can't just be 100% a job. So him doing this show is our compromise. But like, you know what, buddy, you need a little more fun. If I would have mapped it out completely, no, we wouldn't be doing it. But you need to have fun. It doesn't matter that this is something that is a job now. You started this because you like fun. So what I find is we'll do that show, and honestly, I'll probably stoke his flame to the point where he'll actually probably perform better at Strongest Man on Earth because he had some fun, he had some exposure in an environment he hasn't been in. So that's why we're doing that show.
I get a kick out of the idea that he's like, I like doing the professional thing sucks. I want to do more strongman. Like his idea of fun is more of what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where that show in particular, it's a Giants live show, so they're light. Giants live shows are not heavy, and depending on your skill, they're not particularly hard. So why not? Go have a good time with some buddies, and frankly, I would argue it's probably the most stacked Giants live show of all time. It's an incredible.
Yeah, there's a lot of big names going to that.
Yeah, so it'll be fun. And all of those guys are going to Strongest Man on Earth as well. They're all training through, literally all the ones that are going as well, so almost all of them. The only one that isn't going, funny enough, is the current world strongest man, but whatever. But that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Giants live shows are nice. They usually got a crowd, and the fact that they're lighter and faster makes them fun to watch and everything.
Yeah,
so it's a good time. Yeah.
So the thing that I look at strongman, like you just said, is the fun aspect. Like my background is definitely in powerlifting, which I love powerlifting, but I tell it all the time, powerlifting gets very dull. Like you better just love to train because eventually bench squat and deadlift becomes unexciting. But like I look at strongman and it's like you're doing all sorts of shit and like different you might not even know what. I don't know how far now they post what the events are, but like the events of this competition aren't necessarily the exact same events of this competition. So there's that variety in there, which I feel like is, and even in like, there's going to be an overhead press but that could be a different world. It could be reps, could be a log, could be a different implement. So like the fun aspect, but when you get to your level, when you're training people, does the training look pretty similar? So like, I know like Lucas did the behind the neck 600 pound, but you also that's with a bar, but you also have a log. Like how do you work that in do you just wait until you see a list to work on implements?
So basically, if you're going to be at this level of coaching, you really have to be a systems-based coach, and your systems ideally is based on actual science and things that have been proven, but once you have your system, you have a congruent path, regardless of where you are in the year, that you have to be hitting certain principles of training. And once you establish those principles, you just hit repeat. And what that will do is raise the athlete's general base of skill, which the skill in this particular case is strength and power. And you then take those skills and apply it to a specific event when necessary. Usually find out anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks out what that is. And they can just hit the ground running because they've already established their skills at this high level, right? So, they know what a log fucking feels like. They know what an axle feels like. So when you're working more congruently throughout the year on the strength element or the skills related to strength year round, they're basically going to be ready for anything once we know what's going on. Right. And so if you hyperfixate, for example, on just doing events year round, you are going to completely create your static strength, your dynamic power, your flexibility even, and a lot of metrics you're going to get stagnant. Like, yes, you might be really good at the events, but you're putting a ceiling on your total strength potential. And at the end of the day, once you reach a certain level, your job is no longer to be the best at log. It's to be the strongest dude there who then can apply that strength to the log. And those are very different things. Like, it's
Yeah.
sure, if you happen to be the most technical motherfucker on the planet, but you can only press 100 kilos, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, like,
Yeah.
you need to have a combination of them both and fixate predominantly on a system that's going to push your total organism year round, and it's repeatable.
Yeah.
And I feel like guys are getting, like, we talk about this in other sports, like, guys are just getting, there's way more well-rounded badasses. Like, I feel like when I was growing up, like, watching it, like, there would have been like, oh, this is the squat guy
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
this is the overhead press guy. But now I feel like it's just like murderer's row
Yeah.
at every fucking event. Like,
It's the best the sport's ever been is right now. I don't care what anyone says. You could bring peak Brian Shaw, peak Zydrunas, peak Eddie Hall, peak Thor. You put them in this mix, they're not winning all the shows. They'll do really good, and they might win some of them, but they're not winning all of them because now we went from having, because usually per generation there's been like two guys, always like two guys that are like, it's gonna be Brian or Z, you're gonna win this show, right? Now there's like five or six who could win the show. And they might not be as good as some of those guys' specialties are, but they're way better full spectrum.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's fun.
it's, yeah.
So when you
very exciting.
when you're talking about the like general preparedness and then sport specific preparedness, do you kind of block it where you do more general preparedness like further out from competition and more specific stuff closer to competition to kind of keep that that engine running in terms
Yeah,
of the
I mean, you have
athlete's
to. I mean, if you don't do that, you're kind of fucked. But yeah,
Yeah.
you basically you have to run it that way. Because ultimately, again, like their actual once you've reached a certain level of skill amongst the implements broadly, your job is not to be just to do strongman events. Your job is now to get viciously strong. It's the exact same thing an Olympic weightlifter will fall into. If you're familiar with someone like Dmitry Klokov, for example,
Mhm.
Dmitry Klokov has been doing weightlifting since he was literally 5 years old. His father was a Soviet national champion and a world level champion as well. So he's been in weightlifting since he was a boy. By the time Dmitry Klokov was 16, his technique wasn't getting any better. Like
Yeah.
what was established was established. So, those last 10 years of him competing wasn't mastering the snatch or moving his foot a little bit here. It was, no, Dimitri, your job is to get fucked up strong. So the same thing happens to strongman once they reach a certain level of proficiency of the skills associated. I personally think most strongmen don't do that. Most strongmen will just kind of ram their heads against the wall at certain events and just assume they'll make them better. And higher exposure to things will at first, and then you hit a wall. But yeah, that's just basically how the progression just has to go. So it's far more important what you do in the off season than it is during show prep, which would be anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about if you're trying to win, unless you're already on top, but if you think about like the time spent, unless you're going for, let's say, a world record, but like the time spent hyper fixating on, let's say, when Eddie and Hathor were getting crazy about the deadlift, like that definitely took more time out of their training. Like, and for most humans, I guess I've never trained or worked out with the world's strongest man,
Mhm.
but that means we're taking a backseat. Something's taking a backseat to there.
Yeah.
And if you were already going to win the deadlift at 1005, let's say, that usually doesn't win anymore, but and you spent all that time to get to 1100, like that didn't do anything for you in the competition, but you probably sacrificed something while getting like hyper fixated. Now, getting a world record in something is fucking, you can't
That's
fault
great.
anybody.
And
in
if
that.
that's their goal, good
Yeah,
for
that's
you. But if you're
awesome.
someone who's trying to compete in the full show, you're in trouble. Thor's actually a perfect example of this. And I love Thor. He's a buddy of mine. His coach Sebastian is a buddy of mine. I love those guys. But like Thor's a good example of this exact predicament. Thor going into the Arnold Classic last year, or the one that just passed, he hyperfixated on a 502 or 1 kilo deadlift raw, which is bananas. Like even the concept of that raw is ridiculous. But he also wanted to podium or win the full show, which is like dog. Like those two things are not going to go hand in hand. It's not how this works anymore. And we saw that. He unfortunately missed the deadlift, which is a shame. But in the next event, which is the frame carry, an event that Thor destroys 9.9 times out of 10, he dropped it 3 or 4 times running up the ramp because he was just so smoked. Right now,
Mhm.
how much actual frame training did Thor do in prep for that show where he supposedly wanted to win while fixating on the heaviest raw deadlift ever? Probably not that much, and it showed, right? So, that's some of the things that you will run into if you hyperfixate on one thing at a time nowadays. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So one thing we learned, I've not been to a World's Strongest Man, but we had, I don't know if you know who Alan Thrall is, but we
I
had
do.
Alan Thrall on, right? around. It must have been right before.
Yeah, right
World's
before.
Strongest Man, because we had asked him if he was going.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Have you ever been to one of those? They're like 12 hours long, and you don't know when the hell an event is going to be. You're just sitting there forever." It was very surprising because I thought he was going to be, because he's a strongman, right? Like he loves strongman.
World's Strongest Man is probably the worst spectator version of this whole sport.
Okay.
It's not.
So
I'll be honest.
that's uncommon.
What's that?
Like that's uncommon. So like if we went and watched Rogue.
Oh yeah. Well, so this is the thing. This is the truth of World's Strongest Man. World's Strongest Man is a reality TV show.
Mhm.
It is not the peak of the sport. It's not. And it's not set up to be a sport either. It's not set up to demonstrate who the best in the sport is either. I don't care what anyone tells you. The way that the rules are set up, the way that the heat system is displayed, and the way that they organize it in terms of even athletes' participation, nothing is geared towards athletic performance for the athletes. It's truly not a sport. It's a reality TV show.
Just all to get the show.
It's far more important where the boom mic is than the athlete experience, in my opinion. And that's just the truth. And that's what no one really wants to talk about, but that's what it is. So, when I say, for example, Strongest Man on Earth is our Super Bowl, and that's the real world title to us, it's because that show, and like Rogue Invitational and the Arnold, for example, those shows are trying to be a sport. And they're trying to have the greatest sport-like experience, not only for the athletes so they can participate and put on a good show, but also for the fans to enjoy. That's not what World's Strongest Man is.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard
take
like
that
just
as
a billion horror stories about like, changing events without notice. Like they show up thinking they're going to do a log or something. It turns into a yoke or whatever. Like,
well,
crazy things
that
over
to
the
be
years.
fair, there are always faults like that at kind of every major show. Way less recently but it has happened in the past. So I'm not even going to condemn them for something like that, because like sometimes equipment breaks or whatever,
Yeah.
or your sponsor failed to bring something they promised. Like I'll never get on a promoter for that, because I as someone who's been around people helping put on shows, I get that. I'm more obsessed and critical of the curation of an actual sporting event.
Yeah.
And wanting the experience to be that of like watching a football game or whatever, right? And that's just not Worlds is, and I don't think that's what Worlds is pretending. Well, commercially they're pretending to be, but the reality is it's just not that. So, sport, I think, in my opinion, if you're trying to find out who the actual strongest man on the planet is, watch The Strongest Man on Earth, hosted by Brian Shaw. If you want to find out who maybe is the most well-rounded guy, something like the Rogue Invitational is utterly incredible. I mean, those, again, it's, there's 4 majors. One of them is a little, whatever, and the other 3 are absolutely sporting events.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean, if you think about like how long World's Strongest Man has been going, like, and then look at like when I look at the old highlights and they had like the tug of war and stuff like that, like
Right.
they kind of they got started before the athlete really mattered.
Mm-hmm.
They just got some strong guys.
Yeah, it was like 1977, I believe, was the first
Bill
year.
Kazmaier and stuff wasn't very strong, but
yeah, well, it was made as a reality show, TV show. That's why it was made. They just invited the strongest guys they could possibly find. Like, let's find out, guys, and they just put them in a field and made them do weird shit, and that's cool. And then as it's gone on in time, and they've sold dozens, if not hundreds, of contracts to different European television networks and CBS in the United States. I believe it's still CBS in the United States. It just becomes more of a production, and it's not even run and owned by Giants Live. A lot of people assume Giants Live own World's Strongest Man. They don't. It's owned by IMG, which is a major promotion conglomerate that owns WWE and the UFC. Funny enough, so it's not even so. It's run by people who don't actually know the sport.
Right.
That's why it's not a sporting event at all. So I think people would be surprised how things actually go once they're there. Now, that being said, the talent is real. Those athletes are real. Those weights are real almost all the time. So,
that was a hell of a comment right there.
How do
I don't know if I could walk past that comment. Almost all the time. Can we dive into that quickly without getting
there
yourself?
There are just things that are not always as they're written. That's all that it is. There have definitely been times where things are written on a screen that are definitely not that.
Oh yeah.
We didn't mean it was 1,000 pounds. We just liked the way it looked. Like we weren't claiming that that's what that was.
Most of the time it's due to mistake, but some of the time it's just due to whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think some of those events, like especially like they don't do it so much anymore, but they have like the barrel squat or the barrel deadlift where they load barrels in.
Oh, I love those. Those are fun.
yeah, great events. But they'd be like, these are, 60-pound barrels. So every time it goes in, they'd say that's 60 more pounds that they're squatting. But then the barrels are here and the lifter's out here on a lever, and it's like, well, they're
Well,
not.
that actually, to be perfectly honest, I don't mind so much because that's just strongman being strongman. I don't
Yeah,
mind.
just it's for the show though,
Just,
right?
yeah, it's just other stuff where I'm like, I know for a fact what that weighs, and you're telling people one thing, and that's not what it is.
Yeah.
So it's other stuff. But anyway, your original question about what was your original question?
I don't know, we were talking about training stuff. We got wildly off track.
Oh
How do
yeah,
you?
yeah. So with all these majors, it is difficult to get people ready throughout the year. But more than likely, I think I'm one of the few coaches that is less is more when it comes to competing at shows. Someone like Lucas, I tell him you got three, maybe four, but usually three in a year. Pick them wisely. And
Yeah.
we're not doing more than that because at the end of the day, he just turned 30 like 2 weeks ago. He's a young guy, so if he wants to do this for another 10 years and still be competitive, which he could do, you're not doing 4, 5, 6 shows a year. That's not sustainable. You do need to rest. You need times away. You do need to do very long GPP mesocycles. Like, yeah, it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of the unique thing about strength sports is like the wheelhouse. Besides, obviously, there's very, very strong 23-year-olds, but you see a lot like of success 30. It's not like the NFL, like 30 to 40, 30 to 35, like very strong, like top level competitors in all of the strength sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the open, for the open divisions, you could maintain your dominance into your 40s, whether you're a man or a woman. Open athletes tend to last a lot longer in that respect. The smaller you are, weight class wise, the much smaller your ceiling is going to be, because at the end of the day, the smaller humans are way faster, and you can only maintain
Right.
a certain level of speed and power until certain, usually early 30s, and then the 22-year-old's going to kick your ass.
Does in weightlifting, does it fade faster?
Yeah,
Because
just
obviously
as
your
fast.
explosiveness is
Yeah. The
going to
open
be
guys
commuting.
still last longer,
Okay.
and the open women, but still the exact same thing. If you're an 80 kilo man, don't like there are very rare 80 kilo men over the age of 33 to 35 over that age that are winning or podium at Worlds. It's very
Mm-hmm.
rare. It's usually gonna be the 26 to 29-year-old.
Okay, so I got some technical questions about programming around strongman for you.
Sure.
All right. So I'm a big fan of asynchronous programming. So I do all my training in 5-day rounds instead of 7-day rounds. And I started doing that back when I was still doing track and field because it was difficult for me to manage the recovery needs of kind of traditional training with actually doing the sport also.
Yeah.
And I'm always been really curious about strongman because when we talk about training loads, relative load matters and absolute load matters, and they are different cups kind of sometimes, right? So are there tips that you've got for people who are getting to the point where their absolute loads are starting to really matter for how do you manage your frequency or your volume that are a little different than what they're going to see when they're just going on the Reddit forums for how do I become a stronger lifter? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, at a certain level of strength, once you're a high level individual, whether it be you're an 82 kilo woman or an open class man, you're just too damn strong, and your ability to maintain staying near 88 plus percents is just dangerous at a certain point. Like you're just, your joints can only hold up so much. So what becomes more important, in my opinion, is regardless of how you feel, pre-planned deloads and alternating intensity bi-weekly, whether it be something max effort work and then putting a lot of emphasis on those other weeks on speed or positional focus work. You just kind of have to do that. Like it's basically a requirement at a certain point. And for those that might argue that, look at athletes that were pretty linear focused or linear progression focused as they passed their 20s and went into their 30s, and they usually petered off, or that's when injuries started to happen quite consistently and things like that. Like you have to down regulate usually every other week, and when you do, make something a priority that week. So again, speed or positions, max effort on the other weeks, and max effort is a very loose term. I'm just using that loosely. And then pre-planned deloads. Like no matter where my athlete is in a training cycle, they're going to deload on week 3 or week 4 every time. I don't care how strong you are, doesn't matter where you are, like every 4th week we're deloading. So planning those things out pretty far in advance is going to save careers and save a lot of, headache.
Yeah.
That's not even that hard to believe. Like for someone like me, like you just do that. It's just a week, but it's just because I could recover much faster because I'm not that strong. So like usually like when I program for my high school kids, first half of the week is all going to be the max effort, and then the back half of the week is more like positional reps, stuff like that. But they're not that strong. So by Monday again, you're perfectly fine. Like
Right.
you probably could even, for a beginner, you could probably even compact that down. It's just the stronger you get, like you're just zooming in. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like you just got to take a longer freaking time before that recovery.
Yeah,
especially at
basically,
that
and someone young, like the people that you're working with who are that young, yeah, you could have a max effort earlier in the week, and then the same week do speed work and things like that. You could, and then as they get stronger,
Yeah,
like,
you just gotta
start expanding a little bit. Then a whole week is speed work, and then a whole week is max effort, and then you know what I mean, like it just as they get older. It's mostly training age as well, but yeah, it's pretty much how it kind of has to go. And I just find extreme longevity in that. Um, Without it, again, linear progression's sick, and you could rock that, frankly, for years. Like, you know, someone from 16 years of age to probably 23 could do a 5x5 every fucking week and make progress. But you will hit that wall. And, you know, when you're, and yeah, at a certain point, when you're 70% is, you know, 680 pounds, and for a squat or something, that's a very different 5x5 now.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
if someone else do a 5x5 at 70% and it's only 315, they'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we had Logan Chapman on, who was a 1,035 squatter, and he talked about, like, you know, he was trying to do these like multiple set workouts with these giant weights and was just like killing himself. And eventually he was like, I can't, you know, he got a coach, and they were like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's
yeah,
amazing
just
what just certain talent could get away with for a while.
Uh-huh.
yeah. He was like my accessories just turned into like knee health.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I just did my few squats and like I'm smoked. Like so
So, when we had Alan on and he talked about strongman training, you know, he recommended trying to have a regular part of your day be in some kind of, you know, some kind of event that you did for time, you know, so to build that strength endurance piece, like for, you know, if you're doing medleys or presses or whatever. Is that a regular part of your programming? Does that usually show up when you get closer to a show? How do you?
No, that's more of a stylistic thing, and that's fine. You know, I think doing conditioning the way that he's talking about is regardless an important attribute to just general physical preparedness, and definitely throughout certain portions of the year we're doing things like that. But it's not always something that I have in place, you know, during peaking or something. It really just depends on the show and where that athlete might be. You know, I have certain athletes that are incredibly conditioned; they don't need to focus on stuff like that. So it's a little more athlete dependent. But yeah, I would say if we're talking about broad spectrum training, yeah, of course you have to have conditioning related to things for time, working, you know, from ATP to glycolytic and certain energy systems, aerobic to anaerobic transitions. Those are really important. But I wouldn't say it's always in my peaking.
Yeah.
It just depends.
Yeah.
It's the unsexy answer is depends.
Yeah. That's we joke that should be the tagline for the podcast, because every time we talk about training, the answer is always, it depends.
It depends.
Yeah. But, you know, for example, an example of that, which is kind of what Alan's talking about, but not quite, but basically the same. You know, let's say you have an athlete doing a log for reps, for example. And if it's a weight that they could absolutely manhandle, it's pretty low in their total strength spectrum. A great way to prepare that is using cluster sets, right? Now, a cluster set is essentially doing exactly what Alan's talking about, I think a little more poignant and related to the skill of an event. So, you know, you'll do 3 repetitions, rest 45 to 60 seconds, 3 repetitions, rest 45 to 60 seconds, 3 repetitions, rest 3 minutes, repeat that cycle 3 times, right? So it's just enough time to maintain skill and associated with the task, but not enough time for full recovery. So you're pushing, you know, ATP into anaerobic systems and your skill associated with the task, right? It's kind of big bang for buck. So it's essentially the exact same thing Alan was saying, just I think a little more focused on an event training, right? So that's something that I would do during peaking that's similar to that.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I forget exactly when you said you had started coaching.
Oh, you're good.
But so like the transition from when I started watching, which probably would have been like the late 90s, like you see like the Mariusz Pudzianowski years, where it was like pretty obviously heavy, like it's all heavy, but it was lighter and like definitely more like cardio based. And then like through like the late 2000, like 20 teens, like the into the Brian Shaw era, like it was getting very, very heavy. Do you feel like it's like, where do you feel like that path is going? Do you feel like it's kind of settled into a nice medium? Do you feel like we're just continuing to get heavy?
I actually do. I think it's actually right in the middle now, probably for the first time ever. The sport definitely has gone through these massive transitions and waves in what they find to be acceptable in terms of weight. Like, those late 90s, early 2000s, it was light as hell. Like, there are 105 kilo men shows that are way heavier than World's Strongest Man 2002.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, as an example, right? But then, 20, for whatever fucking reason, promoters lost their marbles between 2012 and 2015, decided, oh, let's just kill some guys, and went stupid heavy. I mean, literally, many careers were ended during that era. The greatest of all time, Zadrunas, his career was ended due to, in my opinion, reckless weight selection at the Honor Classic.
Well, and some of the injuries that happened then were injuries that you'd never hear of in sport. Like they would tear ligaments that held like the larger like central foot bones together. It's like I didn't even know that was possible. Like
when you run a 1,700-pound yoke or something, right. Weird shit's gonna happen. But and then now I think the sport is kind of like right in the middle. There are still some shows that I think are irresponsibly light. Not irresponsibly in the form of like people can get hurt because they're not as light, but irresponsibly like dog. Like what are we even testing now? Like that was my critique of World's Strongest Man earlier in the year. Like their sandbag loading medley, the bags were 275. There are 80 kilo men shows running 275-pound bags. Men who weigh 176 pounds.
Yeah.
So, like, what are we even talking about? Right? So stuff like that. There are women shows running 275-pound bags. So when I see stuff like that, I get aggravated. But that's not the norm. Like the norm is, I think, far greater now in terms of perfect averages. Now Brian Shaw decided to be Brian and created the heaviest show in the existence of the sport, which exists now. Thank you, Brian. But it's good at least to have a test of like who's actually the strongest man. So I don't mind it one bit. I prefer that than the lighter option.
And at least that's a show.
It is a show.
You might not be that guy.
Like, and that's okay.
That's not my show.
That's okay. But no, I actually much prefer where the sport is now. There are some shows that are lighter. There are some shows that are heavier. There's some shows right in the middle, and they're all pretty much respected the same. And I like them. I like them quite a bit. It's good that there's these options for the most part. Whereas before, is either everything was cartoonishly light, or you're gonna die. So this is much better.
Yeah, because it kind of goes both ways. Like you definitely don't want to see your athletes like. I don't want to see, let's say we're going into the finals. I don't want to see anybody miss, like get 0 reps. Like that's brutal.
I actually don't mind that.
Like, you're in a different spot than me.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just a spectator. Like I want to see, obviously I'll like on my side, besides my favorites, like I would rather like everybody is just razor thin. I want to go into a final where there's like 4 guys that could win, which usually isn't, that's usually unrealistic.
Well, this year was the case.
Yes, very
this
much.
It was genuinely 4 men: Trey Mitchell, Ryan O'Neill, Mitchell Hooper, Tom Stoltman. All 4 of those guys. They were flipping back and forth who could have won that. It was really
and it was super awesome watching a spreadsheet and listening to Big Law's wife. Yeah, I forget her name.
Yeah, Liz.
Liz. Yeah, like listening to her sneaking her cell phone and doing a podcast. I was like, this is such a great spectator event here. Like, looking ridiculous.
I remember
it was an interesting event. But yeah, no, I very much enjoy where the sport's at. And honestly, I like the rule of thirds when it comes to an event. I think a third should get crushed. I think a third should struggle.
Okay.
A third should do well. And I think a third should dominate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have a show like that per event, you're doing a good job.
That's probably a pretty good. Then you probably picked the right weight.
Yeah, that's generally speaking a good show. For me, now I'm super biased, but
Yeah, I mean, but you make sense. Like the tough thing is like someone might be in the World's Strongest Man, but like an 800-pound squat might be it. But there might be guys that are like 900s and reaching 1,000. So like, what do you pick? 750, and then then you're going to see the guy that can squat 1,000 is going to be bored. Like, like, this isn't even a challenge.
You'd be surprised though, how I will critique the modern day strongman. The one thing that hasn't been consistent or kept up from previous generations is the squat.
Yeah,
a lot of guys now cannot squat to save their lives, and it's bananas to me.
Yeah, we saw that. I mean, I don't just last year's or the years before. Was it the year before last that they had in the prelims for the World's Strongest Man? They had a squat that was like 600 pounds. There was a bunch of guys who didn't do it.
Oh, it wasn't last year. It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I have no sense of time. They all just blend together for me.
725 pounds, and a lot of dudes
Yeah.
crushed, which is like, I'm speaking as a coach when I say this, but if you can't squat 725 as an open strongman, you have a lot of things to reconsider about your training, because that is a ridiculously lightweight for someone who's competing at that level of competition.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Which is an insane sentence to speak, right? That might be like, that sentence had probably never been spoken for like the first 2,000 years of strength training or whatever.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But like, come on, man. If you're allowed to wear a suit and wraps and you can't squat 725, dog, get the hell out of here. Like, whatever. It's my opinion.
Yeah, not small humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like the average guy there weighs 170 kilos, or like 374, right? So like if the average dude is between 350 and 374, the average, come on. But
that's so freaking huge. I don't even know if I've met someone like athletically that large. I've met a 400.
I met Lucas.
Guy, but that's true. I guess I did meet you guys. Until then, that's the joke I always tell people is like, if Lucas wasn't there, you're by far the biggest man in
which is
like,
I mean at the
high school meet that you went
which is
to.
hilarious. By the way,
you're just like, don't let Alec fool you. Alec's freaking.
I'm wide. I'm short though.
He's short, but he's big.
I'm the prototypical, stereotypical looking powerlifter from the early Ed Cohen is a whole 5'3" or whatever.
But
5'4".
I've never shown a photo of a man as many times as I showed pictures of Lucas.
Yeah,
like I'm not a thin guy. Like I'm more broad than an average human. And Lucas makes me look like a freaking swimsuit model. Like I look so tiny compared to this man.
And what's funny
is I listen to like the top guys, and they're like, "Oh, Lucas is coming in a little undersized."
Yeah. Well, Lucas is a small one.
Damn.
At these shows, he's considered one of the smaller dudes. He's just way stronger than most of them, which is funny. But it is interesting once you start getting around humans that like Lucas has hands bigger than most computer monitors. You know what I mean? And he's still one of the smaller guys. At 6 foot tall, he's the small guy because he's only 370 at 6 foot tall. You know what I mean? It's a different caliber of human being.
So having been to a lot of these shows, is like, do you remember a time? Is there a person you've met where you walked in and you were just like, oh my God? Like,
yeah, honestly, one time, and it was 2018 Thor.
Yeah.
No human in the history of Earth has ever come close to 2018 Thor. Thor now is not close to 2018 Thor.
Yeah.
That was a very different thing. That thing, whatever that was, could not be defeated in any strongman contest, and he wasn't that year. And had he just not retired, he probably would have gone down as the greatest of all time. I think that retirement was a bit of a mistake, but what do I know? I can't even tell you just how big he was. It doesn't even make sense. And I met him. I wasn't even a strongman coach then. I was just an Olympic lifter, an Olympic lifting coach, and I was at Arnold, Ohio. I was competing for the weightlifting competition at Arnold, Ohio, in Columbus. And I was at the Rogue store because they have a storefront in their factory, their warehouse.
Right.
He walked in, and I literally, at the time, I was with an ex-girlfriend of mine, and she's Scandinavian. And he comes in, and I go, "What the fuck?" Like I couldn't believe what I was witnessing, because at that point I had met Brian Shaw, I had met Peak Eddie Hall, like I've already met them when they were the biggest, and they were huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was different. And I like his forearms were genuinely the size of my quads at that time. And I just look at this guy, and I walk right up to him and go, "Hey, my girlfriend really wants to meet you because you're just a freak." And he's just like, "Oh, thank you very much." And he's like the sweetest guy, and like whatever. But I just couldn't. It'll never happen again. I truly believe a human being will never be that big and that strong and that lean ever again in the history of humans. I don't believe it'll ever happen again.
It's a bold statement.
There's a little.
You weigh 440 pounds with a 6-pack.
Yeah,
like,
no,
I mean,
it doesn't make sense, guys. It just
I didn't say it was an unrealistic statement.
It's just so crazy. So crazy.
You've just really lightly painted this picture that I can't get out of the back of my head. So this girlfriend that you had, the Scandinavian woman,
yeah,
was she also like, when I think of a Scandinavian woman, like
She's way bigger than me.
Yeah.
Way
Like
bigger than me.
I now like the two girlfriends that we've learned about, like one was a world's strongest woman.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
a Scandinavian woman. Like I think Alec, you
I
have
got
a yeah.
He's got a
like
type.
I'm gonna be looking for that from now on here. Like,
I like
Yeah.
strong. I like strong human beings.
Yeah. He knows what he's about.
oh man, that's
Yeah.
we joke about having an after dark section, like for Patreons. Like,
Yeah, sure. On the uncensored podcast. Yeah.
yeah,
We
Oh,
don't
man.
censor much on this one.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any aside from Meet and Half Thor, do you have any really great stories from between 2018 and now doing your coaching?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot. There's quite a bit. I've been really lucky, man. Most careers do not have the trajectory that I have. I think it's a massive combination of luck and met with. I am too. I don't like losing. I'm obsessed with winning, and I don't like being anywhere near close to losing. Right. So when you have that sort of luck in combination of that sort of personality type, you tend to do well. So I've gotten to experience a lot. I say all that because I've gotten to experience a lot of really cool things throughout the sport. Like I remember, at the Magnus Classic, it was the second year they had it over in Iceland. I was coaching a friend of mine named Jacob Finnerty, who's also a very good strength coach. He coaches Nadia Stowers, arguably one of the greatest middleweights of all time in the sport. She's multiple time world's strongest woman. And I was coaching him for that. And, I got to lift the Husafell stone in Iceland, surrounded by 15 pro strongmen. And for whatever reason, they were all cheering me on as some like dumb coach who was just like picking it up for funsies. And I was like, oh, this is a weird moment. I guess I can't fail now. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, when things like that happen, you're like, holy shit. Like it's such a weird thing being surrounded by heroes who are now your peers or friends even.
Mm-hmm.
And, or being, I was somewhere in Europe in getting drunk at the bar with 6 pro strongmen whose names I will not reveal. And for whatever reason, Country Roads Take Me Home came on in this bar in Europe, and all 6 of us got on the table and started screaming the lyrics and having a great time because we're all hammered and like singing the song. And for whatever reason, and by the way, none of them were American. They all were from Europe or Oceania, and they all knew every word too. Like you have these weird cultural moments like that where it's like, this is the coolest life of all time. Like this doesn't make sense. I work on the internet and I get to travel around with the strongest humans to ever live. So I've had a lot of very cool experiences in the sport.
So from the outside, it seems like maybe besides some key dislikes, it seems like the group, the strongest men, are pretty close. Like obviously there's competition, and when there's competition, these are men that want to win. Like there's no, but it seems like they are able to get along pretty well.
Oh, dude. It's not really spoken about publicly, but I will because I don't care. I'm a coach. The previous generation, a lot of conflict, a lot of inner conflict that I don't understand because I wasn't around for most of it, but you could still pick up some of it. The current crop of pros, whether they're American, Australian, New Zealand, UK, Canada, the coolest crop and nicest group of motherfuckers that have ever done the sport.
Yeah.
Just about, there's only like 2 people that are like, yeah, whatever. I wouldn't hang out with that guy, right? There's only maybe like 1 or 2 of them, but like literally almost all of them are the coolest dudes you've ever met. They're all having a good time before the show. They're all talking. Some of them are quieter than others, but they're all extraordinarily friendly. Like you always hear that thing, oh, the brotherhood, which in the previous generation I kind of think is bullshit, if I'm being honest. But this one, it's the coolest guys. Like they really are just the coolest dudes.
Yeah. I had always wondered with that, like all the beef that showed up in the previous generation, how much of it was actual beef and how much of it was
There's a lot.
trying to sell tickets,
There's quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's not even the dudes that people think it is.
Oh, okay.
It's other guys that people never would have guessed.
Well, I mean, at least they kept their shit behind closed doors
For the most part.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Besides Eddie and Half.
Yeah, there's maybe like only like 2 guys that I personally want to go out and get a beer with in this current crop.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it great. So here's another question. So I've been a football coach for as long as I've been a powerlifting coach, and I've met a lot of people that say like they're obsessed with winning. And what you wind up hearing from pretty high level coaches is the effects that losing have on like just their like makeup, their soul, like cannot, because you expect to win.
Yeah.
You go in there. So when you do win, you go, okay, that was supposed to happen.
Yeah, I did my job.
All right, yeah, I just did. But losing is brutal. Like the effects of losing. So I've met lots of very successful coaches that wind up getting out of it because the I don't know if heartache is not quite what I'm going for, but like it just kills you. The losing kills you way more than winning propels you. And I see that a lot in football. Do you feel like as a self-proclaimed like super competitive guy, and maybe you're just whipping that ass so much that you don't see it a lot, but like
my percentages of podium, regardless of weight class and gender, is very high, and I'm very proud of that. I would argue that I probably have the highest. It's probably between me and Shane Germain. But yeah, I very much understand the feeling of like especially if it's a show that we should have done well.
Mm-hmm.
It takes me a couple of weeks to get back to normal because I fucking hate losing. It makes it, and I'm not mad at anyone, or it's like I'm ever mad at my athlete or whatever, because there's always going to be a reason why, and you always have to analyze yourself. Maybe you were the reason, depending on the situation, right? Or maybe your training methodologies weren't as good as they could have been, or whatever. There's always a myriad of reasons why maybe you didn't perform as well as you should have, whether you, as a coach or as an athlete that you're coaching, right? But man, I detest losing, like with every part of me, and it's just not. It's something that I don't identify with. It's something I don't understand, and it's not something I would ever will continue to do. Or if it does happen at a high level show, like for example, Lucas just had the worst performance of his entire career with me a couple months ago at Worlds. That is not something that we've ever done before. It's not something we'll ever fucking do again. And we know exactly why it happened. And it's preventable, and that'll just kind of be what it is. But man, I detest it because it's just not something that we do over at this camp. It's just not something that we do. And I'm vehemently opposed to it. So it's, for me, it helps push me forward to working on the things that I need to get better at, which is important. And the things that you can control as a coach. Which is more than I think people care to admit, but it's just one of those things. Yeah, I mean, it would never push me away ever, because for me, my own personal goals, like obviously I coach athletes and other personal goals. Like Lucas wants to be as good as his genuine goal is to be as good as he possibly could be. That just so happens to mean he could be one of the better guys to ever do it, in my opinion, right? And he knows that. I've coached athletes in the past, like when I used to coach Inez, who is the strongest strongwoman to ever walk the planet, and she won the two majors. I coached her to win the two biggest shows in the sport. Her goal is to be the best, right? So for me, I have similar goals. My goal is to be the best strongman sports coach at a high level. Hard stop, no argument. After a body of work of 20, 30 years, you can't deny it. Like that's my personal goal, right? So I don't think it would ever make me quit, to answer your question, but it certainly will make me fucking read a lot more and work a lot harder. So whatever.
It's funny, like my friends don't invite me to game night anymore. And so like I feel
like you're a dick. No, I'm just
because I want to win. But it reminds me, your comment reminds me of Mike Holmgren's retirement speech. He said that the lows keep getting lower and the highs keep getting lower. That's really,
dude, that's so true. I remember after Lucas took third at the Strongest Man on Earth last year, which no one predicted to be on podium. I was literally the only asshole on the internet claiming that he was going to hit podium. He didn't even say he was going to make podium. He was like, I might take sixth. And I was like, no, we're taking third. You're not going to do better than third, but you will take third. And he did. And dude, I remember, because, you put so much, you guys have coached before, you put so much into... in your case, the kids or adults or whatever situation, maybe yourself, right? And when it finally happens on a big stage, which you know how hard that is to have something happen on a specific day, and everything has to go right, and even the things that go wrong, you have to then make it right. When it all happens, like I was so proud and happy, but it's mostly a feeling of just like, oh, this 1,000-pound weight is now off my chest. Now I'm just allowed to breathe. Is mostly the feeling now. It's no longer just like, yeah, it's more like, oh, fuck, thank God it's over. You know what I mean? Like, it's more of that now. But, that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, again, like commonalities between all of the wildly successful people that we've had on have been, like an intense drive, and you also have the thing where you feel responsible for it. Everybody who we've had on who's done anything feels responsible for everything that's going on around them, regardless of whether or not it's actually their responsibility.
It's true, and I think you kind of have to. I think a lot of coaches don't realize. I was one of the very first coaches, genuinely, on a consistent basis, I'll say, to show up to every international show.
Yeah.
Like the coaches weren't doing that. And I could confidently say that. And that's not an ego stroke, but it's something that I learned from other coaches, from the sport of weightlifting. In the sport of weightlifting, there's no fucking way you would go to a competition, local, national, international, without your coach. It doesn't even compute. Like your coach is the coach, like in football or something. Would a football team show up
just
game without a coach? Like it's the same thing. To me, it's the exact same thing. And a lot of the strongman coaches recently they're showing up, which is cool, but you can affect so much of the outcome by being there as a coach. And I personally take a lot of responsibility for the environment that they're in, the headspace, the ways in which we warm up, the ways we do all the things. So yeah, like in my opinion, you should have an overwhelming feeling of responsibility for what you're trying to do, especially if you give a fuck. And if you don't, and you supposedly care, reconsider your priorities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I have not had an international level, but I've not my national level kids and stuff. And just thinking of the times, like, sure, if everything's going correct, I don't have a great like my job is just congratulating them, making sure that they stay on track. But there's been plenty of my lifters that are in a mid tailspin after the second squat. Sure. It's like if I wasn't there, that would have been terrible. Like they're probably bombing out of the meat. Like so, and that's only 3 lifts. I could only imagine over like a strong. There's way more opportunity for something to go bad, a slip or whatever. Like, so yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think you should take complete ownership of what's happening in front of you. And yes, obviously, like intellectually speaking, we know that at the end of the day, it's the athletes on the platform, and it's just them. But you could influence a whole fucking lot.
Yeah, well, think about how many shows you've seen where somebody could have won if they didn't try to take first place in an event that they weren't going to get first place in, right? Like if there was just a coach there in their ear being like, scratch that 1,050 deadlift, we're just moving on to the next event. We're taking our second place and we're making points.
Great example is Tom Stoltman, who's a phenomenal strongman, multiple-time World Strongest Man winner. And, at the Strong Classic last year, or Strongest Man on Earth, I should say, when he's competing against Lucas and all those other guys, all Tom had to do to hit podium that show was not zero the stones. Because he had already zeroed the squat, right? He already had a freaking zero. Had he and he went straight for the 600-pounder, because it's Tom Stoltman, missed, proceeded to miss, zeroed. Had he just done the 450 for 1 rep, Lucas would have took 4th. Had he had a coach there,
right,
that would have been fixed. And that's a $28,000 mistake.
Yeah,
that's not fun.
And
no, that's tough, dude.
Yeah. We talk all the time on the show about it's important to know when you should be passionate about something and when you should be dispassionate about something. And it's really hard for an athlete who's in the competition to be dispassionate about anything, right? You can't, you cannot convince me that they're going to I think, there's always been people who did it really well. Like Zadrunas won his last Arnold. I don't remember if he even scored first on anything, he showed up and got points in every event and ended up winning. And that was his thing. Like when they interviewed him, he was like, I was here to score points. So I took the positions I could get. But for an athlete to show up and do that is really, really hard. That's a level of self-discipline that you don't see very often,
Yeah. And, that's why guys like Hooper, for example, are just objectively the best. I know he didn't win Worlds this year, but he's still number 1 on the planet, right? So, that dude just scores points. He doesn't, recently, really doesn't win too many events. He's just staying up there.
Yeah, just scoring points.
And his coach is there for the most part nowadays at the show, so it certainly helps.
Yeah. I
had something.
You did?
I fucking hate it, dude.
You had a moment of wisdom to share?
I need to hop back on Alpha Brain.
Overpriced. You get the same thing. Overpriced.
Yeah, all it did was it just made me fucking really. It was like Coke, man. I wasn't remembering anything else. I just fucking got all zipped up, which I guess isn't bad.
If you want to be zipped up,
Coke is cheaper.
Yeah.
No, it actually is.
Yeah, the Alpha Brain was expensive shit. Damn, man, I thought I had a really smart question, but I forgot.
That's all good.
It came and went.
Yeah.
We're gonna run into our time here pretty soon anyway.
It's the funny thing is I should just be saying those things just so people think I'm more. Oh, I remember. So one of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership by
Jocko Willink.
Yep. I fucking love it. I'm ex-military. It just hit me right where I needed it. But the funny thing is that book is exactly what you just talked about. You already live your life by those principles of every part of your athlete's journey you can and should affect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's basically what it is like,
Yeah.
if you're a part of an organization, you shouldn't be like, I've done my job, now you go do your job. Like, what things could I help Kyle out in doing? Like, if you want to be good, like, make sure that you're taking ownership of the whole system. And it's
Yeah.
funny because that's basically how the most successful guys that we've talked about, like, that's just how they live. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get there. Like, for example, I've never read Jocko's book, but I'm aware of who he is, and he seems like a really interesting person. Driven by discipline, which I like those individuals generally speaking. But I think a lot of people who are obsessed with things that kind of intuitively end up getting there. Usually in an unhealthy form, but then you kind of figure out some checks and balances. But yeah, it's hard for me to imagine in a situation in which that just isn't natural to be obsessed with every element of something that you're doing if you really want to be the best. And to be honest, I don't think being the best is something that everyone should want to strive for.
Yeah, I think that's the real answer, is that most people don't.
Yeah, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
I think everyone should strive to be proficient in whatever it is that they're trying to do. You don't have to be the best, but you should be proficient. I think some of these lessons can apply. If you're a lunatic, sure, go dive and figure it out. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. But it's just one of those things that I like to win. And you kind of just need to figure out the things that do it for you.
Yeah.
And be patient and just work hard. Because I remember one thing Lucas was talking about. He was like, when he came, so for people that don't know, Alec and Lucas came down to Washington State High School Powerlifting Championships. That was in May.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about, he was like, there's kids here stronger than I was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Many of them were way stronger than him at that age.
Yeah. So just keep going. You never know. Like,
one of my favorite things about strength sports is, like, you can usually tell if somebody's fast or if they're going to be able to jump. It usually doesn't take much of an eye. Like, they aren't necessarily world beaters right out the gate. You can develop quite a bit of speed or jumps or whatever. But, like, strength, there's just no way of knowing how far somebody can climb. Like, sometimes it's really surprising.
It's shocking, man. If people knew, like, for instance, so I coached another woman named Erin Murray at one point, and she won 3 world titles with me. She won 2 World Strongest Woman titles and a heavyweight world title. There were 2 World Strongest Woman titles. One was in the 73 kilo weight class, one was in the 82 kilo weight class, and then one was in a heavyweight weight class in a different competition. So she was really good, to put it lightly. But when she was in high school, similar to those girls that you coach, she probably weighed like $140. Maybe $130. Probably couldn't squat 135. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and you had girls at that show squatting, 120 kilo, 110 kilo. Some of them were squatting in the 300s, like, incredibly strong women. So it really goes to show you, like, how far. And she was a band geek. She was in band.
Yeah.
And she went from band to then, squatting 440 for reps, weighing 170, and winning World's Strongest Woman titles. So, like, it is alarming how strong humans get from a deficit, if you will, in comparison to their peers. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I've just seen it over and over in the 25 years or whatever I've been in sport. I've seen somebody who was, like, just not on anybody's radar, just like slowly cruise past all their peers, and end up in some position that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I always tell people, when it comes to strongman, like, strongman isn't who the strongest guy is, it's who could last the longest.
Yeah.
That guy ends up being the best strongman on the planet. And these massive flames that you see, the guys that come in and destroy and win whatever, like, quickly, like, real quickly, they don't last long. Right. Usually 3 to 5 years at most.
Yeah.
It's those guys that kept on taking, like, 6th and then 5th and then 4th and, like, add 10 years and, like, oh, like Zydrunas. Like, this is my favorite fact about Zydrunas. Zydrunas' first appearance at World's Strongest Man, I want to say he was 23. He was 23 years old. And then I always ask people, how old was he when he won World's Strongest Man? This is the GOAT.
Mm-hmm.
How old was he when he won? He was 23 when he first got there.
I don't know.
I would have. Well, yeah, I'm gonna guess late just because you said it. It would be 35. Holy shit! Yeah,
way fucking later. Way later. Like, it was like over 10 years, I want to say, and then he won it a lot, right? So, it just goes to show you, like, just how long some of these journeys could take, and and the in betweens. I mean, hell, after he showed up to Worlds that first time, he was like 23ish or so. It was like a year or two later. He was running a Conan's wheel in a competition somewhere in Scandinavia, like a smaller show. And in that smaller show, he was beating the current world's strongest man which is really cool for this young guy, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Jaakko Ala was the current world strongest man at the time, the guy from Finland.
Yeah.
And
Super explosive dude.
yeah, great athlete.
Yeah.
Well, what happens to Drunas on his Conan's wheel at 25-ish or so? Both quad tendons explode at the same time. Loses both of them at the same time, collapses. He's like, oh, my whole strongman career is over. Like, there's no fucking way. Comes back after that and just becomes Z. Like, it just really goes to show like how resilient you could, if you're tough up here and you're willing to put in the work in just a few decades, it's incredible what you could do.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're at a great spot because we want to get you out of here in time for your thing. So
I have a few minutes if you need. I'm fine.
Yeah.
We talk afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. We still want to. I still want to pick your brain about some things. So I want to get you before you have to go.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we got some good takeaways. If you really love something, find something you love, let it kill you. Right. Go do the thing. Right. Be obsessed about it. Yeah. 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 Be responsible for the things in your life. You know, those are all good takeaways. All right. Where can people find you at?
Alec Jose on Instagram, if you so choose, and teamrpe11.com.
Sick. All right. Thanks everybody. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Helps out the show a ton. We really appreciate it.